Game Design 2, Lecture 6, Segment 2. Let's talk about some reward schedules. In the previous segment, we talked about Skinner and how he upped the bar from Pavlov by creating his theory of operant conditioning. He used rats and pigeons and boxes, and he would vary the rate or the routine in which the rewards, the reinforcements, were given to the subject based on their actions or maybe based on time. So we're going to look at 4 of these examples and talk about them here in this reward schedule section. It's important to note that what Skinner did was he could base when, let's just say, the food pellet for the rat came out based on how many times the rat pressed the lever, which is responses, or based on how much time had passed, which would be an interval based on time. So here is our first one that we're going to look at. It's known as the fixed ratio. And the way these graphs work is we have the responses, which is synonymous with the behavior that you're trying to condition here on the vertical, and then time on the horizontal. So, by the way, these are exemplary graphs. They're not actual, so they're typical, but it's not actually recorded data. If it were actually recorded data, it would not look this uniform, but these are the general trends that we see for each of these reward schedules, so it's a little bit easier for students to pick out the kind of the points and the important learning points if we just show it in this generalized way. So the way this works is some time has to pass before the rat actually walks over there and presses the lever. And while they're pressing the lever, it takes a little bit of time as they're going through the act of pressing the lever. So each of these spots, the dots, represent when the reinforcement is given. Again, we're sticking with positive reinforcement here. So this would be when the food pellet comes out. And what Skinner could do is he could base it, how many times does the rat have to press the lever before the food pellet comes out. Now, if that is a set, known, fixed number of responses, then this is the fixed ratio. It's fully based off of the rat's actions, the rat's choices. I should say the subject, because the same thing works for humans. We'll talk about some examples here in a second. So let's just say it's a 5-to-1 fixed ratio. In other words, over the first few seconds or first minute, the rat has to press the lever 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5th time, out comes the pellet. What do we notice happen next? I've drawn a big white arrow pointing at it. Yeah, we see this flat area, which is known as a period of extinction. Now, I didn't make up this extinction term. Skinner did. It's not like dinosaurs go extinct, they die and they never come back. Period of extinction is simply a notable amount of time that passes where no responses are recorded. So in this period of time, we see that the rat does not press the lever at all. The behavior we're trying to condition ceases. Until sometime later, when the rat starts pressing the lever again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more times, out comes the pellet. He stops pressing the lever again. Why do you think that is? Well, remember, these primary reinforcers reach a satiation point. Secondary can as well. I'll give you an example here in a moment. But the rat's probably full. It wants a food pellet. It knows what it needs to do to get a food pellet. It does it. It gets the pellet, and then it chills out and does its rat business until it gets hungry again and it goes over and starts pressing the lever. So we see this flat area of extinction largely because of satiation, because the rat got its reward and it's no longer motivated to press the lever. So let's put that into game terms. What kind of games or game mechanics can you think of that follow the fixed ratio mechanic? Well, this reward schedule we see commonly from quest givers. A quest giver will say, go kill 10 skeletons, come back and I will give you the sword of 1,000 truths. You're like, okay. So you go out there, you kill 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You finally find the last one, 10. It's dead. And there's another one over there. There's an 11th one way over there, and the quest giver is way back there. What does the player do? Yeah, he doesn't care about the 11th skeleton. He killed 10 skeletons. He's going back for his rat pellet, for his reward, for that sword. So it's not the intrinsic or inherent joy of killing skeletons that is motivating the player to do so. He's performing that action because of an extrinsic reward, the quest giver's sword that he's going to gain after he completes that quest, that 10 skeletons to be killed. We see this in other places, like you need to win 3 races in order to move on. You need to collect 7 flowers. Also, one that's kind of less obvious is leveling up, right? You need to collect 1,000 XP before you can level up to level 2. And even if it's an increasing amount, so level 1 is 1,000, level 2 is 5,000, level 3 is 20,000, because it's a fixed amount and known by the player, it still follows this fixed ratio reward schedule. And here's an example you can probably relate with. How many times have you been up way later than you expected to? You haven't done your homework. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. You're tired. You want to go to bed, but you're at 95% of the way to leveling up, and I'm just got to level. I really want to level. And then you kill that last mob. You hit the next level, ding, and you immediately teleport to a town and log out. Yeah, that's that extinction. That's that flatlines. If we were to record players as they perform the behavior of collecting XP and they're responding to the stimulus, which is, hey, you need to level up, and every time you kill a thing, that little progress bar goes a little bit more. They're continuously motivated to keep responding, keep performing that behavior of collecting XP until they get their little rat pellet. Until they level up, they're satisfied, they log out, and they cease collecting XP. We see the period of extinction. So that's my example for fixed ratio. Remember, it's a fixed amount of responses, behaviors that the player has to perform, yields a known and set quantity of reward. So let's go on and look at the next one. The next one we're going to talk about is fixed interval. So it's still fixed, it's still known, it's still set. It's not varying, it's not random, it's fixed. But now instead of being based off of the horizontal, we're going to base it off based off of the vertical, we're going to base it off of this horizontal time. So here again, let's use the example of 5 minutes. Every 5 minutes you can do some action, let's say click a button, and you get a reward. Right, so time starts. I'm going to wait 5 minutes. I hit the button. I get my reward. How likely am I to hit the button again immediately following my reward? But very unlikely, which is why I've noted here this high extinction. Because unlike fixed ratio, if the subject wanted 2 rewards in a row, they can. They know what to do. They have that agency to get 2 in a row by simply hitting the lever 10 times. After 5, 1 will come out. After the next 5, another will come out. I got 2. What if I want 2 in a row with the fixed interval? I'm out of luck. There's nothing I can do. The only kind of decision or strategy I can form is to set a timer and come back in exactly 4 minutes and 59 seconds so I'm ready to hit the button and I can maximize the amount of time or the amount of presses that I can get in the same given overall amount of time here. So what game mechanics come to mind when we're talking about fixed interval? Well, the most common one that comes leaping to mind are daily quests, right? You can do this quest once a day. It resets at midnight every night. So if you've done it once, there's no chance that you're going to do it again until that interval elapses. Also, things like Clash of Clans, where I start filling up my gold mines or my elixir wells. These things I know are going to take a certain amount of time to fill up. There's no point in me continuing to click on them or check them until that time has elapsed. They're full, I collect my resource, and I can start doing the things that I actually want to do. And it's interesting because when specifically the gold mine fills up, it does not automatically go into your bank and start filling up again. What do you have to do? you have to log in and click the button. They're conditioning players to log in at a set interval of time so that they're playing at that regular pace, that regular tick. And they have options to do other things like, I don't know, make microtransaction because they don't want to wait another 6 hours for their elixir well to fill up. So yeah, these are all examples of fixed interval. And outside of games, if you've ever bought anything that goes on sale at midnight, if the response that we're measuring is how often are individuals going to the website and trying to buy this thing that goes on sale at midnight, at 10 p.m. nobody's there. At 11 p.m., very few people are there. Come 11:30, we're like right here in this arc. 11:30, few people. 11:45, 11:50, and by 11:59, the entire world is there and servers start to crash, right? If you're talking about BlizzCon tickets or whatever. These are all examples of fixed interval where all I have to do is wait. And interestingly enough, even with animals, rats per se, we will notice that, Skinner noticed that when the interval, they were exposed to the interval enough times, their internal clock would naturally lead them to press the lever more the closer the time got to the elapse of the interval. In other words, they don't have a little rat watch that they're setting to go off in 5 minutes. But after they get their pellet, after they've been in this chamber long enough, they get their pellet and they don't touch that button for 4 minutes. 4.5 minutes, they might hit it once. But between 4.5 and 5 minutes, if that's the fixed interval, they start hitting it rapidly. And the closer it gets to that interval, that fixed known interval of time, because they've learned it, the more they press that button. Last example, kind of interesting, I think, cooldown timers, right? If you have the super awesome ability that kills everything on the screen, but it's got a 60-second cooldown timer, right? You're going to hit that and you're going to get your reward, your gratification, big particle effect, everything dies, you get loot and points and this, that, and the other. And then the enemies start, overrunning you again. And even though you really want to hit that button again, you don't. Because you see the little cooldown timer, right? It goes from, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. You're still not hitting it. 45 seconds, you might hit it. You might be like, all right, where is this thing? Where is this? Where is it? Okay, hang on. Come on. And you start spamming that button as it gets closer to the interval to be elapsed. We see this in all kinds of places where the player has to wait a fixed interval of time. The behavior, the responses elevate the closer to that interval we get. Next one we're going to look at, variable interval. So this one is also based off of time, but the variable keyword tells us that it's not fixed. It's random, it's unknown, it's changing. So what Skinner did was, for example, set it between 1 and 5 minutes, or between 1 hour and 5 hours. The rat doesn't know when its next meal is coming. So we see two things. One, we see very low extinction. They never altogether stop pressing the button because, it could be like it's been 1 minute. Last time it only took 1 minute. Time before that it took 4 minutes, right? Here we are in this example here. Let's say it takes 3 minutes and then 1 minute and then 4 minutes and then 4 minutes and then 3 minutes and then 2 minutes. You keep the rat guessing. So they never actually cease altogether. But if you also notice, compared to the last two, the overall behavior, the overall responses collected in the same amount of time is much lower than both fixed ratio and fixed interval. And again, the reason is because there is absolutely no agency here. The rat can't even learn the amount of time that needs to pass. The player can't even set their watch so that they come back in 7 hours and 59 minutes when it's an 8-hour cooldown on whatever it is they're trying to do. And there aren't a whole lot of game mechanic examples for this exact reason that the variable interval is one of the worst at operant conditioning for this reason. If I had to take a stab at it, it'd be something like rare spawns. Sometimes this certain mob spawns and it's got a silver border and it's a little bit tougher and it's got a better chance to drop other stuff. Now, don't think about the dropping other stuff. What I'm talking about is its chance to spawn. It's based off of time. It's not based off of how many times I kill it or how many times I look for it. It's just a random amount of time. I don't know when, and it's unpredictable. World bosses. Now, I'm not talking about world bosses that's, after you kill it, it's not going to spawn again for 24 hours. That would be a fixed interval because I know 24 hours have to pass before I can do my thing. If there's just randomly certain times world bosses or mobs spawn, then that is a variable interval. So you don't have players spiking in behavior in responses when we get close to that known interval because they don't know the interval. So they just kind of always check and they're always milling around. And you're not going to see a huge surge at any given time, but you're also not going to see a complete extinction of that behavior, of those responses altogether. So variable interval, random, unknown, based off of time. So that leaves us with the final reward schedule that we're going to talk about. And you probably guessed it, it is the variable ratio. Also known as the money ratio, right? It's because this is the one that slot machines are built off of. This is based off of responses, but the subject doesn't know how many times they have to perform the response before they get their reward. The subject doesn't know how many times they have to pull the lever in order for them to win the jackpot. I don't know how many times I have to kill the boss before it drops the one piece of gear and 20% chance it has of dropping it that I'm looking for. Can you think of any other examples? You should, because they are rampant. Because this reward schedule is so effective at operantly conditioning subjects, players, to continue to want to perform the behavior, to provide the response. We see it from decks of cards. I don't know when I'm going to get the card I want, but I know the more decks I open, the more chances I have. Loot boxes, keys, blueprints, you name it. It's one of the reasons why there's this big debate over if loot boxes are gambling or not. Spoiler alert, they are. It's based off of a random chance. So even though there's no physical money involved, you are gambling every time you open a loot box. And just side note, by the way, these are not the views of Full Sail University, LLC subsidiary Fine Print. I personally think that loot boxes are just fine. The players should just know. We'll talk about that later when we talk about the responses. So variable ratio, it's a random amount of times the subject has to provide the response, perform the behavior before the reward is given. So why don't rats stop pressing the button? Because they could get a pellet the very next time, every time. I pressed it 5 times, I get a pellet. I press it one more time, I get another pellet. I can get pellets anytime I want. Or can I? I just better keep pulling this thing because I never know when the next one is coming. And unlike the interval, where they don't know how long they have to wait, they have no agency. Here, I have agency. Just keep doing the behavior as many times as you can to try to get what it is that you want, which is why we see people. It's not addictions. Addiction is a different part of the brain, but we can be conditioned to really want to continue to play, even to an unhealthy level in some of these games based on the mechanics. So variable ratio, the money ratio, based off of responses, based off of behavior, but an unknown quantity thereof. And it's usually RNG is involved, and there's a random percentage chance. Interesting side note, as Skinner was testing this with pigeons, he noticed that pigeons were better conditioned with a 50% variable ratio than a 2-to-1 fixed ratio. So think about that. In a 2-to-1 fixed ratio, every 2 pecks of the button, every 2 pulls of the lever, every 2 presses of the button gives me 1. In a 50% chance variable ratio, over time, it's going to balance out. The odds predictably, statistically, are going to yield about the same thing. However, because of how they're presented, that the pigeon, per se, hits it 3 times and doesn't get a food pellet once, well, it goes ballistic and it's going to peck the junk out of that button as many times as it can. And kind of furthermore, just bonus info here, Skinner noticed that certain pigeons started to learn and predictably exhibit odd behaviors, like spinning in a circle before pecking the button, or backing up and then moving forward every time before it pecked the button. Can you think about why they did that? Have you ever been with a friend and you're watching a football game and they're like, man, every time I go to the kitchen, my team scores. So when they get in the red zone, I'm going to the kitchen. Or, every time I take off my hat, right? My team turns the ball over. So I'm going to wear my hat the entire time. Yeah, it's kind of like superstition. At some point, this pigeon was pecking the button, did not understand the actual mechanics of receiving a food pellet, was like, where's my food pellet? Turned around in a circle, pecked the button, and a pellet came out and associated turning in the circle with getting the food as opposed to just randomly getting the food based off of how many times they have to peck the button. So it's silly, but it's also a human characteristic. You know, pigeons learn to turn in circles. Humans learn to follow superstitious traditions and the like. So last example I want to give you here is from a game called Star Wars Force Arena. It was a mobile game. It was kind of like a Clash Royale deck builder where, for me personally, I was playing Palpatine. I got my Palpatine card and I'm shocking fools and killing Jedi. And then as soon as I got up into the next tier, Han Solo started eating my lunch because he was a level 2 Han Solo. He's got Chewbacca, and I could not, couldn't keep up. So I did something that me personally, I characteristically don't do. I went and I made a microtransaction. I bought a pack of cards. And in that pack of cards, guess what card there was? Sure enough, it was a Palpatine. If you think it was a coincidence, you're fooling yourself. It's too easy for the game to record the hero that I'm playing with the most. And the very first time I convert from a free-to-play player to a paying player, they're going to set that hook. They're going to condition me to continue to buy more packs in the future by giving me not just a food pellet, but the exact food pellet that I wanted. And it worked because I kept playing and I got to the third tier, and all of a sudden I can't beat Luke Skywalker because he's level 3, and I went back and I paid for more. Very uncharacteristic of me, but I volunteer this personal example because I know about operant conditioning. I was already teaching this lecture when this game came out, and I spotted it a mile away. I mean, look at this. So in this slot, when I earn a pack, when you buy a pack, you get to open it right away. And as I already said, opening a pack is a variable ratio because I don't know how many times I have to open a pack in order to get the Palpatine card that I want. However, when I earn a pack, I have to put it in this slot and wait 8 hours before opening it. Guess what? Yeah, that is a fixed interval. This mechanic will lead me to, even if I'm done playing, I'm going to set my watch and say, all right, I got 7 hours and 52 minutes. Go away and beep, beep, beep. 8 hours later, pick up my phone and play again. They've conditioned me to log in at that fixed interval of time. Also over here, these play packs, every time I win 3 times, I earn 1 pack. Yep, that is a fixed ratio. 3-to-1 fixed ratio, win 3, get 1. And then finally, the free pack was, who knows? I don't know when it would come. I don't know why. It wasn't based off of anything I did. There was no timer that I could discern involved. Just every once in a while, when I opened up the app, that free pack was sitting there. So imagine this, 4 hours after I put the phone down, I've got another 4 hours to wait until my earned pack opens. I might look at my phone, but I'm just going to check. I'm just going to see, nope, still no free pack. Or maybe there is. Okay, I got it. That's kind of that mentality of the variable interval. Variable interval is I just kind of always check, but it's not going to motivate me to spike at any predictable time. So in just this one screen, just this one reward screen, we see all 4 of the reward schedules that I just talked about. We have the variable ratio of opening the pack, the fixed ratio of 3-to-1 play pack, the fixed interval of waiting 8 hours to open a pack, and the variable interval of, I don't know when, but every once in a while a free pack shows up. So again, I volunteer this personal example because even if this was another big thing that Skinner realized, even if you know what's going on, even if you know the mechanics and you see clearly that it is a Skinner box mechanic, you're not immune. The neurotypical human brain, even aware of what's going on, is not immune to operant conditioning. Now, it's important to note that it might not push you over the edge. If this is the buy to don't buy, and I'm sitting down here and I'm never going to make a microtransaction. I don't care. It's just principle. If this is the line, it might not move you over to making the buy decision, but it will move you closer. Operant conditioning will affect how you cognitively go about making decisions. Again, not always pushing you over the tipping point, but always having an effect. So it's pretty powerful. I mean, this is, again, mind control. As game designers, you are controlling the minds of your player, both to get them to release dopamine and be happy, but also to make certain decisions. And maybe it's sinister, as in I want you to make these microtransactions, but it's also just general strategy. I want you to learn how to play this game and make good, meaningful decisions so you can be successful and have interesting encounters, experiences. So next up, we're going to talk about a couple other psychological phenomenon related to kind of the same vein as this operant conditioning effect. And then we'll come back and talk about the sinister part of it in the perspective segment. So stay tuned. Talking psychological phenomenon next. Thanks.